Imagine a billionaire CEO, a man who controls everything, until he steps into a cemetery and finds a kid digging up his wife's grave. Alexander Carter thought he knew his late wife, Evelyn, inside and out. But when 7-year-old Liam looks up with her eyes and says, "She's my mom, and she left something here," everything unravels. What's buried in that dirt? A secret so explosive it could destroy an empire or forge a family from the ashes. Buckle up for a wild ride of betrayal, murder, and a truth that hits harder than a freight train. Hey, if you're hooked already, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop a comment. What do you think Evelyn hid? Let's unravel this mystery together. The autumn wind sliced through Greenwood Cemetery like a knife, carrying a bitter chill that rustled the golden leaves scattered across the stone pathways. Alexander Carter stepped out of his sleek black Range Rover, his polished boots crunching against the gravel as he adjusted the cuffs of his tailored suit. He was a man who owned rooms before he even entered them, CEO of Carter Tech, a multi-billion-dollar tech empire that ran half the digital world. His broad shoulders and steely gaze screamed money and control, but today, none of that mattered. Today was the anniversary of his wife Evelyn's death, a car crash that had stolen her from him, and he was here to lay white roses on her grave, a ritual he'd kept every year since she'd been gone. The cemetery stretched out before him, a silent city of weathered tombstones standing like sentinels under a gray sky. Alex gripped the bouquet tighter, his breath fogging in the crisp air as he followed the familiar path to her plot. The ache in his chest hadn't dulled with time. Evelyn had been his anchor, the one person who'd seen past the billionaire facade to the man beneath. Now all he had left was this: flowers, silence, and the ghosts of what might have been. But as he rounded the corner to her grave, something stopped him cold. A small figure knelt beside Evelyn's headstone, hunched over like a shadow against the gray marble. A boy, couldn't be more than 7, his thin frame shivering in a threadbare jacket too big for him. His hands were moving, clawing at the dirt around the base of the stone with a desperation that twisted Alex's gut. Tiny fingers scraped through the cold earth, flinging clumps aside as if he were digging for buried treasure. "Hey!" Alex's voice cut through the stillness, sharp and commanding. "Kid, what the hell are you doing?" The boy froze, his head snapping up. His face was pale, streaked with grime, but it was his eyes that hit Alex like a freight train. Big, brown, and glistening with tears, they were Evelyn's eyes down to the soft curve of the lashes. For a split second, Alex thought he'd stepped into a dream or a nightmare. The kid stared at him, chest heaving, then pointed a trembling finger at the headstone. "Mom said there's something here for me," he rasped, voice barely above a whisper. "Something special." Alex's world tilted. He took a step closer, the roses slipping slightly in his grip as he read the carved letters on the stone. Evelyn Carter, beloved wife. His mind raced, clawing for sense in the impossible. "What did you just say?" he asked, his tone low. Dangerous, like he was interrogating a rival instead of a child. The boy wiped his nose with a dirty sleeve, his gaze unwavering. "Mom's name was Evelyn. She said if she ever went away, I'd find something in a special place. This is it, right?" He pointed again, more insistent, like he was daring Alex to argue. The air felt too thick to breathe. Alex dropped to one knee, gravel biting into his expensive trousers, and stared at the kid. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice cracking, despite his efforts to keep it steady. "Who told you this?" "Liam," the boy said simply, as if that explained everything. "My name's Liam. Miss Joan at the shelter said Mom left me there when I was a baby. She loved me, but she couldn't keep me. She promised she'd leave something, though. Something I'd need one day." His small hands clenched into fists. Dirt caked under his nails. "I've been looking for it." Alex's pulse roared in his ears. Evelyn had never been pregnant, not once in their years together. They'd talked about kids, dreamed of a family between late-night work calls and corporate takeovers, but life had always gotten in the way. Then she was gone, snatched away in a wreck that left him shattered. And now this kid, Liam, was kneeling at her grave, digging like a madman, claiming she was his mother. It didn't add up. It couldn't. Stop, Alex snapped, grabbing Liam's wrist to halt the frantic clawing. The boy flinched but didn't pull away, his eyes locking onto Alex's with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. You're telling me Evelyn Carter, my wife, was your mom? And she left some— Liam nodded, slow and deliberate. She told me stories. Said if anything happened, I'd know where to look. I thought— His voice faltered, and he glanced at the torn-up dirt. I thought it'd be here. Alex let go of the boy's wrist, his hand trembling as he raked it through his dark hair. This was insane. A scam, maybe. Some sick con artist using a kid to mess with him. But those eyes— God, those eyes were hers, like a piece of Evelyn, staring back from beyond the grave. He forced himself to think, to push past the chaos in his chest. What shelter? Where do you live? Brooklyn, Liam muttered, kicking at a loose pebble. The place Miss Joan runs. They take care of me there. A shelter. Evelyn's supposed kid, abandoned in a Brooklyn shelter, digging up her grave for some mysterious something. Alex's mind screamed that this was impossible, but his gut told him otherwise. He'd built his empire on logic, on cold, hard facts. But right now, logic was crumbling under the weight of those tear-streaked eyes and that shaky little voice. Get up, he said, standing abruptly and brushing dirt off his knees. You're not digging anymore. Come with me. Liam hesitated, glancing at the headstone one last time, then scrambled to his feet. His oversized jacket flapped in the wind as he followed Alex back to the Range Rover, small sneakers crunching against the gravel. Alex opened the passenger door, buckling the kid in without a word, his movements mechanical. He didn't know what he was doing. Hell, he didn't even know what he should do. But one thing was clear. He couldn't leave this boy here, alone with a ghost and a hole in the ground. As he slid into the driver's seat and started the engine, Alex shot a glance at Liam. The kid stared out the window, hands clenched in his lap, like he was waiting for the world to kick him again. What's this something your mom left? Alex asked, voice quieter now, probing. Liam turned to him, eyes wide with a mix of hope and fear. I don't know, he admitted, but she said it'd keep me safe. The words hung in the air like a loaded gun. Alex gripped the steering wheel tighter, the hum of the engine drowning out the pounding in his chest. Whatever Evelyn had hidden, whatever this kid was chasing, it was out there, waiting to be found. And it was about to turn his carefully controlled life upside down. Something special was buried out there, and it was going to change everything. The Range Rover purred through the bustling streets of New York, its headlights slicing through the deepening dusk as the city came alive with its usual chaos. Horns blared from yellow taxis weaving through traffic. Street vendors shouted over the rumble of subway trains below, and neon signs bathed the sidewalks in a kaleidoscope of color. But inside the car, silence reigned, a thick, suffocating quiet that pressed against Alexander Carter's chest like a vice. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white against the black leather, his sharp gray eyes darting between the road and the small figure beside him. Liam sat slumped in the passenger seat, his oversized jacket swallowing his thin frame, hands twisting the frayed hem into tight little knots. His gaze drifted out the window at the towering skyscrapers of Manhattan, their glass facades reflecting the last slivers of daylight. He looked out of place, small, fragile, a kid dropped into a world that didn't know what to do with him. Alex's jaw tightened. Just an hour ago, this boy had been clawing at Evelyn's grave, claiming she was his mother, digging for some mysterious something special. Now he was here, in Alex's car, unraveling a life Alex had thought was buried with her. The dashboard clock glowed faintly as they pulled into the underground garage of his Upper East Side penthouse, the tires humming against the smooth concrete. Alex killed the engine, the sudden stillness amplifying the pounding in his ears. He glanced at Liam, those brown eyes, Evelyn's eyes, staring back at him like a ghost in the dim light, and forced his voice steady. You warm enough, kid? Liam nodded, a faint dip of his chin, his breath fogging briefly in the cool air of the garage. Yeah. His voice was barely a whisper, lost in the vastness of the space. Good, Alex muttered, stepping out and shutting the driver's door with a thud that echoed off the concrete walls. He circled to the passenger side, opening it with a quick jerk. Come on! Liam slid out, his sneakers scuffing the floor as he trailed Alex to the private elevator. The door slid shut with a soft hiss, and the hum of the ascent filled the space between them. Alex stared at his reflection in the polished steel, a man in a tailored suit, broad-shouldered and commanding, but with shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. Beside him, Liam's reflection was a stark contrast. Small, hunched, a kid who didn't belong in this world of luxury. The elevator dinged, opening into the penthouse, a sprawling expanse of modern elegance. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the far wall, framing a breathtaking view of Manhattan's skyline, the city lights twinkling like a sea of stars against the darkening sky. The air carried a faint scent of leather and citrus cleaner. The furniture, all sharp lines and muted tones. Marble counters, a sleek sectional sofa, a glass coffee table that gleamed under recessed lighting. It was a bachelor's fortress, designed for solitude and control, not for kids or chaos. Liam stepped out, his sneakers squeaking on the hardwood, and stopped short. His mouth parted slightly, a quiet wow slipping out as he craned his neck to take it all in. The city sprawled below like a living beast, its energy pulsing through the glass. "You live here?" he asked, clutching his jacket tighter, as if it could shield him from the sheer scale of the place. "Yeah," Alex said, tossing his keys onto the counter with a metallic clink that reverberated in the vast space. "Make yourself at home. You hungry?" Liam hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor, then lifting again. "A little," he admitted, his voice soft but clear. Alex nodded, moving to the kitchen, a sterile setup of stainless steel and black granite. He yanked open the fridge, its contents a testament to his solitary life. A block of aged cheddar, a bottle of untouched Pinot Noir, a carton of almond milk he'd forgotten about. He scowled, then spotted a loaf of bread and a stick of butter tucked in the back. Grilled cheese it was. He wasn't a chef, barely cooked for himself. But he could handle this. The sizzle of butter hitting the hot pan broke the silence, the smell of melting cheese wafting through the air as Alex flipped the sandwich with a practiced flick. Liam climbed onto a bar stool at the counter, his legs dangling, watching with a mix of curiosity and wariness. Alex slid the golden brown sandwich onto a plate and pushed it toward him. "Eat up," he said, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed, studying the kid like a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Liam took a tentative bite, then another, the tension in his shoulders easing just a fraction. The sight stirred something in Alex, a flicker of warmth beneath the chaos swirling in his chest. He cleared his throat, keeping his tone casual. "So, you said your mom left something for you. What did she tell you about it?" Liam swallowed, wiping crumbs from his chin with his sleeve. "She used to visit me at the shelter sometimes," he said, his voice soft but steady. "Not a lot, maybe once a month, but enough. She'd bring me cookies, the kind with sprinkles, and tell me stories about knights and dragons and hidden treasure. One time she hugged me real tight and said if she ever couldn't come back, I'd find something in a special place. She didn't say what it was, just that it'd keep me safe." Alex's chest constricted, a sharp pang cutting through him. Evelyn sneaking off to a shelter, spinning tales for a kid she'd never told him about? It didn't match the woman he'd married, the quiet, brilliant accountant who'd balanced his life as effortlessly as she'd balanced his books. "And you thought it was at her grave?" he pressed, his voice tighter now. "I thought so," Liam mumbled, staring at his half-eaten sandwich. "But maybe I got it wrong. She never said grave, just a special place. I figured since she's there—" His words trailed off, and he shrugged, a small, defeated gesture that hit Alex harder than it should have. A special place. Alex's mind latched onto the phrase, turning it over like a chess move. Evelyn had been private, guarded about her past, but this was a whole other life he'd never suspected. He grabbed his phone from his pocket, thumbing through his contacts until he found Daniel Reeves, his private investigator, a wiry ex-cop with a knack for unearthing secrets. The line rang once before Daniel picked up. "Dan, it's me," Alex said, keeping his voice low but firm. "I need you on something, fast. A kid named Liam, from a shelter in Brooklyn. Tie him to Evelyn Carter, my Evelyn. Birth records, foster history, anything. And don't half-ass it." "On it, boss," Daniel replied, his tone clipped and professional. "Give me a few hours." The call ended with a beep, and Alex set the phone down, his jaw clenching. He needed facts, hard data to anchor him in this mess. But Liam's voice broke through his thoughts, small but piercing. "She talked about you, you know?" Alex froze, his hand hovering over the counter. "What?" "Mom," Liam said, lifting his eyes to meet Alex's. "She said there was a guy who'd take care of me if she couldn't. Someone strong, who didn't give up. I think she meant you." The words landed like a sledgehammer. Alex turned away, staring out at the city lights, his breath catching in his throat. Evelyn had she known something was coming? Something dark enough to leave her kid with a riddle and a stranger like him? He pressed a hand to his temple, trying to steady the whirlwind in his head, when his phone buzzed again. Daniel. Already. "Talk to me," Alex said, hitting speaker so he could watch Liam, who'd gone back to picking at his sandwich. "You're not gonna like this," Daniel's voice crackled through, tense and urgent. "Liam's birth certificate checks out. Evelyn Carter's the mother. Father's a blank. Born before you two got hitched. He's been bounced around foster homes since he was a baby, landed at a shelter in Brooklyn run by a Joan Mitchell. But here's the red flag. Someone's been digging into his records. Hacked sealed files recently. This isn't some amateur, Alex. They've got juice." Alex's blood turned to ice. "Who?" "Can't pin it yet," Daniel said. "But I'll keep pushing. Watch your back, man. This smells bad." The line went dead, and Alex's grip tightened on the phone until his knuckles ached. Someone else knew about Liam, someone with resources moving fast. He glanced at the kid, who was oblivious, nibbling on the crust like it was his last lifeline. "You said Evelyn visited you," Alex said, his voice sharper now. "Where'd she take you when she did?" Liam frowned, his brow furrowing as he thought. "There was this big tree near the cemetery, in the park. She'd sit me under it and tell me stories. She called it our secret spot. It's got a hole in it, like a hiding place. Greenwood Park, right next to the cemetery." Alex's pulse spiked, adrenaline flooding his system. "A tree with a hole?" "Yeah," Liam said, nodding more firmly. "She'd point at it and say, 'That's where secrets live.'" The pieces snapped into place with a jolt. Whatever Evelyn had left, it wasn't under her grave. It was in that tree. Alex grabbed his coat from the rack, the leather creaking as he shrugged it on. "Come on," he said, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "We're going back." "Now?" Liam's eyes widened, his sandwich forgotten on the plate. "Now," Alex confirmed, already striding toward the elevator. Liam scrambled after him, his sneakers slapping the floor. The ride back to Greenwood was a blur of speed and tension, the Range Rover's engine roaring as Alex pushed it to its limits. Streetlights streaked past in smears of yellow, the city fading into a dark tapestry as they hit the outskirts. Liam sat rigid beside him, hands clenched in his lap, sensing the shift in the air. They screeched into Greenwood Park just as night settled in deep, the ancient oak looming ahead like a twisted giant against the starry sky. Alex killed the engine and yanked a flashlight from the glove box, its beams slicing through the darkness. "Show me," he ordered, stepping out into the cold. Liam led the way, his small figure darting through the shadows until they reached the tree. Its gnarled branches clawed at the sky, the trunk thick and weathered, a hollow near the base barely visible in the gloom. Alex crouched, shining the light inside. There, a small metal box, taped shut with duct tape, its edges rusted from exposure. His heart hammered as he pried it free, the tape crackling as he tore it open with shaking hands. Inside was a USB drive, scratched but intact, in a folded scrap of paper. He unfolded it, Liam peering over his shoulder, his breath hitching. In Evelyn's neat, familiar handwriting, "Liam, if I don't come back, this is the truth. Be strong. I love you." Alex's throat closed up, the note trembling in his grip. He slipped the USB into his pocket, turning to Liam. "You were right," he said, voice low and raw. "She left something." Liam's eyes glistened, a shaky smile breaking through. "She didn't forget me." But before Alex could respond, headlights flared behind them, blinding and sudden. A black SUV screeched to a halt 20 yards away, gravel spraying as its doors flew open. Two hulking figures stepped out, silhouettes against the glare, followed by a third, tall, sharp-suited, exuding power like a storm cloud. Alex's stomach dropped as the man's face came into focus. Mark Donovan, billionaire investor, a shark in a world of minnows. His icy blue eyes locked onto Liam, then slid to Alex with a predator's calm. "Carter," Mark said, his voice smooth as silk and cold as a blade, "you've got something that belongs to me." Liam shrank behind Alex, his small hand clutching the back of Alex's coat. Alex stood tall, stepping forward to shield the boy, his hand tightening around the USB in his pocket. "He's not yours," he shot back, his tone steel-edged. "And neither is this." Mark's lips curled into a smirk, his polished shoes crunching the gravel as he closed the distance. "We'll see about that," he said, his voice dripping. Mark didn't just know about Liam. He'd been watching them all along. The night air in Greenwood Park turned sharp and biting, the wind howling through the ancient oak's gnarled branches like a chorus of restless spirits. Alex stood rooted to the gravel path, the flashlight's beam trembling in his grip as it caught Mark Donovan's sharp features, those icy blue eyes glinting with a predator's certainty. Behind him, Liam's small hand clutched the hem of Alex's coat, the boy's breath coming in shallow, panicked gasps. The black SUV loomed in the shadows, its headlights casting long, jagged streaks across the ground, while Mark's two goons flanked him, their hulking silhouettes silent but radiating menace. "Carter," Mark said again, his voice slicing through the stillness like a razor. "Step aside. The kid's mine." Alex's hand tightened around the USB in his pocket, the cold metal biting into his palm. His heart thundered, but his face was a mask of steel. Years of staring down corporate sharks had taught him how to bury fear. "He's not a damn asset you can claim," he shot back, stepping forward to shield Liam completely. "You don't get to waltz in after all this time and call dibs." Mark's smirk widened, a flicker of amusement dancing in his gaze. He adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke suit with a casual flick, the movement deliberate, like a lion stretching before the pounce. "Time I didn't know about," he said, his tone smooth as velvet but edged with steel. "Evelyn kept him from me. But now I do, and I'm not the type to let family slip away." He tilted his head, eyeing Liam with a possessive glint that made Alex's skin crawl. "Blood's blood, Carter." Liam's grip on Alex's coat tightened, his small body trembling, but his voice cutting through the tension. "I don't want you," he said, stepping out from behind Alex to face Mark, his words cracking with defiance. "You didn't care when Mom needed you. Why should I care now?" The accusation hung heavy in the air, raw and unfiltered, and for a fleeting moment, Mark's composure slipped, a twitch at the corner of his mouth, a shadow darkening his eyes. But he recovered fast, his smirk sliding back into place like a well-worn mask. "You're a kid," he said, his tone almost patronizing. "You don't get it yet. I can give you everything. Money, power, a name that opens doors. Carter's just a detour." Alex's blood surged hot and furious. He took another step forward, closing the gap between him and Mark, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "He's not a trophy, Donovan, and I've got something you'll never buy." He pulled the USB from his pocket, holding it up just enough for the flashlight's beam to catch its scratched surface, glinting like a weapon. "Evelyn's truth. Whatever's on this, it's why she hid him from you." Mark's eyes narrowed, his posture stiffening, the first crack in his polished facade. "You don't know what you're holding," he said, his voice losing its silk for a rougher edge. "Give it to me, Carter. Last chance." "Like hell," Alex snapped. He turned to Liam, lowering his voice to a fierce whisper. "Get to the car. Now." Liam hesitated, his wide eyes flicking between Alex and Mark. But then he bolted, sneakers pounding the gravel as he sprinted toward the Range Rover. Mark gestured sharply, and one of the goons lunged after him, a blur of muscle and intent. Alex didn't think, he acted. He dropped the flashlight and tackled the man, slamming him into the dirt with a bone-jarring thud. The second goon charged, fists swinging, but Alex rolled to his feet, driving a fist into the guy's gut, then a knee to his jaw. Pain exploded in his knuckles, sharp and searing, but adrenaline drowned it out, fueling him through the chaos. "Enough!" Mark's voice boomed through the park, echoing off the trees. The goons froze, staggering back, one clutching his jaw, the other spitting blood into the gravel. Alex stood panting, fists still clenched, blood trickling from a split lip he barely felt. Mark stepped closer, his calm veneer cracking into something colder, more primal. "You're out of your depth, Carter. Hand over the drive or this gets ugly." Alex wiped the blood from his mouth with the back of his hand, staring Mark down with unyielding resolve. "You don't scare me," he said, voice steady despite the ache blooming in his ribs. "And you're not touching him." Mark's eyes flashed, a storm brewing behind them, but before he could respond, Liam's voice pierced the tension from behind the Range Rover. "I've got it," he shouted, holding up Alex's phone, the one Alex had given him days ago. "I recorded everything you said." Alex's head snapped toward the boy, a surge of pride cutting through the haze of pain. Liam stood there, small but fierce, the phone trembling in his hands but his stance unwavering. Mark's expression darkened, a storm cloud rolling over his features. "Smart kid," he muttered, his voice low and venomous, then turned. "You think a recording's gonna stop me? I own people who can bury that in an hour." "Maybe," Alex said, stepping back toward Liam, keeping Mark in his line of sight. "But it's a start, and I've got more." He tapped the USB against his palm, the gesture defiant. "Let's see what Evelyn has to say about you." Mark lunged, faster than Alex anticipated, his hand aiming for the drive. But Alex sidestepped, shoving Liam toward the car with a barked, "Go!" They scrambled inside, Alex slamming the driver's door as Mark's fist pounded the window, spiderwebbing the glass with a sickening crack. The engine roared to life, tires screeching as Alex floored it, gravel spraying in a wild arc behind them. Mark's SUV peeled out in pursuit, headlights glaring in the rearview mirror, but Alex wove through the park's twisting paths, losing them in the labyrinth of trees and shadows. Minutes later, they screeched to a stop in a deserted alley near the East River, the city's distant hum swallowed by the night. Alex's chest heaved, his hands shaking as he turned off the ignition. Liam clutched the phone, his breathing ragged, but his eyes blazing with determination. "You okay?" Alex asked, voice hoarse, wiping sweat from his brow. "Yeah," Liam said, nodding quickly. "You?" "Been better," Alex muttered, a faint grimace tugging at his lips as he flexed his bruised knuckles. He pulled the USB from his pocket, staring at it like it was a live wire. "Let's see what your mom left us." They climbed into the back seat, Alex grabbing his laptop from the trunk, a sleek, custom-built machine he kept for emergencies. He plugged in the USB, the screen flickering to life as files loaded. Liam scooted closer, his shoulder brushing Alex's, both of them holding their breath. The first file was an audio clip. Alex clicked it, and Evelyn's voice filled the car. Soft, urgent, achingly familiar. "If you're hearing this, I'm gone. Liam, baby, I'm so sorry. Alex, if you're with him, thank you. Mark Donovan will kill me if I talk. He's been washing money through Carter Tech, millions hidden in shell accounts. I found proof when I worked for him, before I met you, Alex. I tried to run, but he's closing in. This drive has everything. Ledgers, emails, names. Protect Liam. He's why I kept quiet so long." Alex's stomach plummeted, his hands clenching into fists as the recording faded. Evelyn had worked for Mark. Carter Tech, his company, had been a laundering front before he'd taken it over. He opened the next file, a spreadsheet of transactions, some staggering enough to topple empires, all tied to Donovan Enterprises. Then a locked video file, password protected. "Any ideas?" he asked Liam, his voice tight with barely contained rage. Liam bit his lip, thinking hard. "She told me a story once, about a dragon named Valor, said it was her favorite." Alex typed Valor into the password field. The screen blinked and the video unlocked. Evelyn appeared, grainy, frantic, her face pale under flickering light. She was in a car, rain streaking the windows behind her, her voice trembling but resolute. "Liam, Alex, if I don't make it, this is the truth. Mark found out I had the evidence. He sent people after me. The crash wasn't an accident, they ran me off the road. Alex, I knew you'd fight for him. You're the only one I trust. Protect him, please. And Liam, be brave. I love you." The screen went black. Alex sat frozen, his breath shallow, rage and grief clawing at his chest. Evelyn hadn't just died, she'd been murdered. By Mark. For this. He looked at Liam, whose eyes brimmed with tears, his small fist balled up tight. She didn't leave me, Liam whispered, his voice breaking. She fought for me. Yeah, Alex said, his own voice cracking as he pulled Liam into a rough hug, the boy's sobs muffled against his coat. She did. They held on to each other, the weight of Evelyn's sacrifice sinking in, a bond forged in the fire of her final words. But the moment shattered as headlights flared outside the alley, Mark's SUV rolling to a stop with a low growl. Alex shoved the laptop under the seat, his pulse spiking. They climbed out, Liam sticking close as Mark stepped from the vehicle. Alone this time, his suit rumpled but his posture unyielding. You can't run forever, he called, his voice carrying over the wind. Give me the kid in the drive, Carter. This ends now. Liam stepped forward before Alex could stop him, his small frame trembling, but his voice steady. You killed her, he said, tears streaking his face. Mom told us everything. You don't get to win. Mark's face twisted, a flicker of something, guilt, crossing it before hardening into cold resolve. You don't understand, he said. I didn't want her dead. She forced my hand. Bullshit, Alex snarled, pulling Liam back. I've got proof. Your voice on that recording, her blood on your hands. You're done. Mark laughed, a hollow, bitter sound that echoed in the alley. You think you can take me down? I've buried bigger men than you. Then try me, Alex said, holding up the phone with Liam's recording. This goes live in 10 seconds unless you back off. Mark's eyes darted to the phone, then the USB in Alex's other hand. Silence stretched taut between them, the wind howling through the narrow space. Then Mark stepped back, raising his hand slightly. You're making a mistake, he said, his voice low and laced with menace. But I'll let you live to regret it. He turned, climbing into the SUV. The engine roared as it peeled away, taillights vanishing into the night. Alex exhaled, his knees weak, and looked down at Liam. The boy's face was set, tears drying on his cheeks. He's not my dad, Liam said quietly. You are. Alex's throat tightened. He ruffled Liam's hair, a faint smile breaking through the exhaustion. Let's go home, kid. The USB had unleashed the truth, but Mark was only steps behind. The alley near the East River swallowed the growl of Mark Donovan's retreating SUV, its taillights fading into the night like embers snuffed out by the wind. Alex stood motionless for a heartbeat, the cold air stinging his split lip, his chest still heaving from the adrenaline that had fueled the fight. The USB felt heavy in his pocket, a loaded gun of truth, while Liam's words reverberated in his skull. He's not my dad. You are. The kid stood beside him, tear-streaked but steady, his brown eyes, Evelyn's eyes, shining with a quiet resolve that cut through the chaos of the moment. Alex exhaled, his breath fogging in the crisp night air, and ruffled Liam's hair, his fingers lingering there, as a faint smile tugged at his lips. Let's go home, kid, he said, his voice rough but laced with warmth, a lifeline thrown across the wreckage of the night. Liam nodded, climbing into the Range Rover without a word, still clutching Alex's phone like it was a shield. The drive back to the penthouse was quiet, but it wasn't the oppressive silence from before. This was softer, charged with something unspoken, a fragile peace born from the storm they'd just survived. The city lights streaked past in a blur of gold and white, Manhattan's skyline a jagged silhouette against the dark sky. Alex's mind churned, piecing together the next move. Mark hadn't backed off for good. A man like him didn't surrender. He regrouped. The USB, Evelyn's recordings, the proof of his crimes, it was their leverage, but it wouldn't hold unless Alex turned it into a weapon. They pulled into the underground garage, the Range Rover's engine ticking as it settled into stillness. Alex grabbed the laptop from the back seat, tucking it under his arm, and led Liam to the elevator. The penthouse greeted them with its familiar calm, glass walls reflecting the city's glow, the faint hum of the heater stirring the air. But it felt different now, less like a sterile fortress, more like a haven. Liam kicked off his sneakers, leaving them in a messy pile by the door, and sank onto the leather sofa, his small frame nearly swallowed by the cushions. Alex set the laptop on the coffee table, booting it up as he dropped into the armchair across from Liam. "We're not done yet," he said, his tone firm but steady. "Mark's gonna come back unless we stop him for good. You with me?" Liam sat up straighter, nodding with a determination that belied his age. "Yeah, what do we do?" Alex's lips twitched, a half smile, half grimace. "We hit him where it hurts." His fingers flew across the keys, copying the USB's files. Evelyn's recordings, the ledgers, the video of her final words, to a secure cloud drive. Then he drafted an email to his legal team, a pack of top-tier lawyers who'd shred Mark in court. He attached the audio of Mark's threats from Liam's recording, the file's timestamp fresh and damning. "This goes to my lawyer," he said, "and a backup to a reporter I trust at the Times. If Mark moves, he's finished." Liam watched, his eyes sharp despite the exhaustion pulling at them. "Will it work?" "It'll work," Alex said, hitting send with a decisive click. "He's got too much to lose. Money, reputation, freedom. We've got him cornered." But even as he spoke, a shadow gnawed at him. Mark's parting words, "You'll regret this," carried a promise of vengeance. Alex leaned back, rubbing his temples, when Liam's voice broke through the quiet. "He sent me something." Alex's head snapped up. "What?" Liam pulled a crumpled envelope from his jacket pocket, the edges worn like he'd been clutching it too long. "When he cornered us at the park, one of his guys slipped it to me. I didn't say anything because I wasn't sure." Alex took the envelope, his gut twisting as he tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, Mark's handwriting stark and... "Liam, I found out about you after Evelyn died. A lawyer tracked me down, said she'd left money for you, a trust I never touched. I could have come for you then, but I didn't. I was a coward, scared you'd pull me down from everything I'd built. I was wrong. I don't expect forgiveness, but if you ever want to know me, the door's open. You're my son, whether you like it or not." Mark Donovan. Alex's jaw clenched, fury flaring hot and fast. "He knew," he muttered, crumpling the letter in his fist. "And he sat on it like you were some investment he didn't feel like cashing." Liam stared at the floor, his hands balled into fists. "He didn't want me then," he said, his voice trembling but growing fiercer. "He doesn't get me now." He stood abruptly, crossing to the window where rain had begun to streak the glass, a soft patter against the stillness. He took the letter from Alex's hand, smoothing it out, then tore it into pieces, letting the scraps flutter to the floor like ash. Alex watched, his chest tightening with a fierce pride. Liam turned to him, eyes glistening but resolute. "Mom left that drive for us," he said, pointing to the laptop. "She picked you to keep me safe. That's what matters." He hesitated, then pulled a faded Polaroid from his pocket, a photo of Evelyn, smiling under the oak tree, her arm around a toddler Liam. "She kept this in her coat when she visited. Gave it to me the last time." Alex took the photo, his fingers brushing the worn edges. Evelyn's face glowed back at him, radiant and alive, a piece of her he'd never fully known. "She was right about you," Liam added, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't give up." The words cracked something open in Alex, a flood of grief and resolve spilling out. He pulled Liam into a tight hug, the boy's small frame fitting against him like it belonged there. "Neither do you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We're in this together, got it?" Liam nodded against his chest, a muffled, "Yeah." The next morning, Alex made his move. He met his legal team in a cramped, fluorescent-lit office downtown, handing over the USB and Liam's recording. "Bury him," he told them, his voice cold as steel. "Every charge that sticks, fraud, money laundering, murder, I want Donovan done." That night, he took a different tack, one he hadn't planned. In a dingy Brooklyn bar, the kind with sticky floors and flickering neon, he faced Mark Donovan one last time. The billionaire sat alone at a corner table, nursing a whiskey, his suit rumpled and his eyes hollow. Alex slid into the seat across from him, dropping the USB onto the table with a dull thud. "You've got one day," Alex said, his tone flat. "Turn yourself in, or this goes public. Every news outlet, every cop, Every enemy you've ever made. They'll have it all. Mark stared at the drive, then at Alex, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. You think you've won, he said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. You've got no idea what's coming. I don't care, Alex replied, leaning forward. You touch Liam, you're a dead man walking. That's a promise. Mark's smirk faded, his gaze dropping to the table. For the first time, he looked diminished, defeated, a king stripped of his throne. He downed the whiskey in one gulp and stood, leaving the glass spinning on the table. Keep him, he said, voice low, but don't think this ends here. He walked out, the door slamming behind him, leaving Alex alone with the echo of his threat. Back at the penthouse, the air smelled of cinnamon and sugar, Liam's first attempt at pancakes, a messy triumph of batter and grit. The kid grinned as Alex took a bite, syrup dripping onto the counter. Not bad, Alex said, chuckling, despite the weight still lingering in his chest. Days turned to weeks, and the penthouse changed. Liam's books littered the coffee table, his sneakers claimed a corner by the door, and laughter, real, unguarded laughter, filled the once silent space. Alex cut back on late nights at Carter Tech, trading boardroom battles for mornings at the stove. He filed adoption papers, the process slow but certain, turning a promise into a bond. One crisp autumn afternoon, they returned to Greenwood Park. The oak tree stood tall, its branches bare against a steel-gray sky. Liam knelt by the hollow, placing a single white rose inside, the kind Alex brought to Evelyn's grave every year. He stood, brushing dirt from his knees, and looked up at Alex. Thanks for fighting for me, he said, his voice clear and strong. Mom picked right. Alex crouched beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder. She picked us both, he said, his eyes tracing the tree's weathered bark. And I'm not going anywhere. They walked back to the car, hand in hand, the wind carrying the faint scent of rain. Mark Donovan's shadow lingered, a threat unfulfilled, but it didn't matter. They'd face the dark and come out stronger, together. Family wasn't blood. It was the fight you chose, and the ones who